what we've seen before, we actually had three fairly different sizes of studios presenting different kind of approach to solutions, from kind of, we can go completely around the pipeline / we have the pipeline, all the way to how do we just do it, hide it from the artist and in between. The three studios are vastly different size. 22 Dogs was presenting around 30-ish, I think you were saying. The line animation, how big are you, Pete, now? 60, 70 when you were at the peak of a project? Something like that. For Tish, was it 400 people you were saying? 400? It's quite a range of studios. And so today, this whole event, for us, it's a celebration apart from Pipeline in general. It's a celebration of us going into a new phase as a company. And we started, what was it, 4 years ago or something like that. We started with this, and this is, we met as a team for the first time, actually, physically, this Wednesday. And I left it hanging there because this is the absolute core of the company and is at the absolute core of the product. That creative teams of all sizes, as we saw here today, should have access to powerful pipeline. That's not trivial, and it's not always the case. I've spoken to tons of studios that are tiny and they have absolutely nothing. Studios that could totally use off-the-shelf solutions and they don't use them because, whatever, put any amount of reasons that you can think of. So we set out in a tiny team a few years back to try to change that, to disrupt it a little bit. And we believe now, after the 4 years, we got to a point where we can really go out with this and help a lot more studios, hopefully, that we are helping at the moment. So there must be a little bit of promo of what we've done. So we'll have a look at what was the journey so far, so everyone understands where we're coming from, before we go to the topic of where we're going to. So we've gone through multiple iterations of the code base of what was called Pipe 1 in 2018, Pipe 2 in July 2019 was released. Then we added OpenPype just to be super clear that this is opened. So I'm not going to call it a rebrand, but it was still, we had to change all of the code base, which, by the way, unpleasant. Don't do it on a regular basis like we do every 2 years. It's not the best. So this took 4.5 years. The thing is, all of the previous versions that we've done, they definitely stood on the shoulders of other open source projects. The target here was, we came to the company, we set it up, and we were like, we were not reinventing the wheel again. We're not doing it. So we took lots of open source tech that was out there. Great projects, the core of it at the beginning, Avalon, Publish, but lots of others. Everything that ASWF is releasing and putting as much of it into one package as possible to make it usable. Turns out we are not, big fans of reinventing the wheels. We like building cars and building things out of these wheels. The thing is that as we were going through the years, the core of this was getting old. At the end of the day, you end up with a spaghetti code that functions, but as we pieced a lot of things together, it becomes non-trivial to maintain it. It becomes non-trivial to expand it. It's just it becomes too expensive at the end of the day. And it's an open source project, but open source project supported by a full-time team, and it needs to be financially viable for the studios that will use it. Otherwise, the open source will die. We have to find a balance. So about 1.5 years ago, we decided to completely rewrite the underlying core, meaning we wanted to keep what is good there, but we essentially ditched everything that's talking to a database, and we looked, okay, how can we make this a lot better going further? Now, at this moment, OpenPype for us, as a brand, will be no more. It's not because of the name, that's not the point, but the jump that we've got to is so large that we decided this needs a new brand, this needs a new name, and this name needs to show the potential of a project going to much, much bigger things than just a pipeline. OpenPype is a pipeline. Everyone sees it, this is a pipeline. So with the team here, for the first time, we're coming out with AYON, open source pipeline for VFX and animation, and hopefully you'll see that this product will be the start of the pipeline for a lot of studios, but we'll take them a lot further than that. So, Now I know what happens when you're halfway through a sentence and you click the button on the remote, and it jumps the gun. So here is ION, is what was supposed to go there in front of it. So there was 1 minute of cut through everything, and you saw roughly 1% of what is there in the product, to give you a little bit of a taste. So let's go into it a little bit. Essentially, there's one bit that I forgot that led us to this, and that's very important to mention, is that all of what you've seen there at the moment was done to the order of many studios. And we will see those studios in a minute, and we'll see their work, and I will repeat this multiple times. Without them, no chance. This is not open source project of a few enthusiasts that are writing it in their free time. This is open source project of studios putting time and money and really a lot of sweat on their side, not just on our side, but on their side. Because trust me, using a pipeline which is being in development is sweaty business for those that are actually using it, not for those that are writing it. And they endured through it. So let's have a look at some stats. Everyone likes stats, right? So until now, as far as we know, around 48 contributors, individual contributors in the project. I'm almost certain there is more. We try to be very careful about tracking all of this, but this actually doesn't involve all of the contributors to the upstream projects that we are using. And there is tons of them, and it's almost incalculable. So I don't know. If I went through all the projects, there's going to be hundreds of contributors that kind of touched this project somewhere. Since the beginning, over 806 GitHub issues closed that were some of them created by us, some of them created by public. Various suggestions, these are bugs, these are feature requests, enhancement, whatever comes to it. We closed around 3,300 pull requests, which each pull request is an individual fix, individual new feature, individual enhancement. Some of them are massive, some of them are small. I pulled this number like 3 weeks ago, and now it's 3,380 or something like that. Like someone was mentioning, I think, Max, that this is a lively project. This is a lively project, trust me. And as far as we can track, internally we as a team, I don't know outside contributors, but we as a team, we spend about 45,000 hours on the development of this. Now calculate how much investment that is from everyone who came into this. It's a massive effort that went in there. And I'm sure there's lots of untracked hours that we're trying to get better at and that are kind of lost somewhere in there. So let's call it 50 for a nicer number. As far as we can tell, and this is extremely difficult to track for certain projects, at the moment we know of around 50 studios that are using ION in production. Now when I say ION, I mean OpenPype as well. We are renaming even the application and all of it. It's one and the same. It's an evolution and revolution in one, hopefully. But 50 that we know of, another 10 that we are almost certain are using it. They're just not communicating it as much, and we keep hearing from various places about more that are using some parts of it. So it's really hard to tell. We believe it's around 60 to 70 studios currently relying on it in production. The 50 that we know of are relying on it to a heavy degree, to either running everything or using most of the workflows that are in it to some extent. But importantly, there's this list. So there are lots of companies here. They're not just studios, there are other companies. Every single one of them helped the project financially. Some of them with the terrible states of the version 0.01 and actually endured through it. John could speak over there from ClothCat. He was, I think, the very first one brave enough to onboard it. Some of them have been with us as a company for a long time, and we've been helping them implement the pipeline completely. Some of them have self-implemented the pipeline and contribute lots of code back into it. And by lots of code, I don't mean small fixes. I mean full big modules that they've put back into the project, which is just as valuable as someone funding the project itself or using the services to actually run it. And again, since I made this list, there's about 4 more. This was 3 weeks ago, I believe, or something like that when I put this together. And now there are 3 or 4 more studios that should be on it, and I'm sure I missed some. And I apologize. If you don't see yourself up there and you think so, too bad. So they deserve an absolute thank, all of them. And again, just to make it clear, not all of them use it, but some of them supported us in other ways. So the project was possible. So, as this grew, more studios got on it. It got a little bit real for us, and now it's getting really real. Let's have a look what they've done. By the way, assembling a reel as a software company is next to impossible. So there wasn't 50 studios in there, and I'm guilting all of you that haven't sent the shots and said that they would. So, we're still expecting them. But it's really amazing work. It's an amazing range of work, most importantly. You could see there are studios in there that we've been working with that are on a completely 2D side. We're talking TV Paint, Harmony, selection, nothing to do with CG complexities, a lot more streamlined workflow, but so much more automated that they need to be. On the other side, very, very complex VFX work, where every shot is crafted for a very long time. And we actually managed to run, I would say 90-95% identical code base across all of these. The changes are in the settings, the changes are in the configurations. Sometimes the changes are in a little bits of code, that is tagged along. But we strongly believe that we can make a pipeline that is going to fit a lot of studios, that we don't have to reinvent again and again. So, why the rewrite? Let's look into some of the reasons. So first of all, we gave a promise. As I said, we're working with a lot of studios on a day-to-day basis. Some of them don't have any pipeline teams whatsoever. We're talking a group of artists that need pipeline, and there is no chance they can write it themselves. On the other side, there are studios that have very solid TD teams. Their situation is these TDs are bogged down with productions, day-to-day fixing situations on the projects. If you've done pipeline, you've been there, you wanted to rewrite that core plugin that you have there for about 10 months in a row, and for 10 months in a row, you have been fixing shots that are going out of production, because that's what's happened. So this is the range, and we promised that if they jump on board with OpenPype and now with AYON, the one thing we can make sure is that they will not come to a point in 3 or 4 years or 5 years down the line where we're going to hear this from them. By the way, real quotes from emails about us helping them. We had a great pipeline, but it's old, and the developer has left the company. Great. Not a line of code, not a line of documentation in there. We're artists, not developers, so we're looking for a pipeline that takes that into account. Okay, reasonable, exactly what Ryan was talking about. We had an overdeveloped pipeline that has died recently. Genuine quote from a sales email that comes in there. If you can tell me what does it mean that pipeline has died, I never got it out of them, really. I can tell you afterwards some details. And we promised that, okay, so we will do our best, everything that we can, that we will not come to this point. That we as a company will focus on looking on the underlying core, that we will step back from the production day to day, that we will sometimes push back on the studio and tell them, you know what, this is today's situation in a shot that needs to be fixed, but that's not how we need to fix it for longevity of the pipeline. This is tough, this is really difficult sometimes to have in the middle of production these conversations, but that was the promise we gave. And we came to the point that to fulfill that promise, we have to rewrite. We have to rewrite the core, otherwise we'll end up with a product that in 10 years is simply not fixable, and we have to ditch all of it. And the second one, we needed to clean up technical debt. Every project has it, and the project that says they don't have it, then no one actually looked in the code base of that project. Every project has a technical debt, and it's our duty to try to clean it up. We probably never will get rid of all of it. By the time you fix the technical debt, you create more technical debt, but we have to try and we have to keep rewriting. We found out we needed to get ION to a point where we don't care what scale of production you throw on it. Studios started using OpenPype way before we decided on this. They were way bigger than we anticipated. And suddenly, in the middle of the production, you realize your database, everything works great for 50 artists, until 50 artists start publishing 10 shots each on Friday night, 10 o'clock on the farm. And you're like, ha, right. So there were these situations that we were fixing in production, and we realized we have to do it from scratch, and we have to do it properly. If the production hits a limit, it should not be on a software side. If this happens, we haven't fulfilled our job as a pipeline developers. The limits will be hit all the time, every production will hit them, but it should be on the budget side, so it's not our fault. It should be on the production side, not enough artists, too many requirements, too many changes. These will always be there. Visual effects will never change, or animation will never change. But we can't let it happen to be on a software side. So rebuild for scalability. And the maybe most important point, immediately at this point, is improved governance of the project. OpenPype grew to scale that we didn't anticipate at all. At the moment, many contributors, that's a point there from, I think, last week, 60 open pull requests into the main, it's just one of the repositories of the project, 60 open pull requests at any point. I think we have 20 integrations with DCCs. I'm throwing numbers, but it's going to be somewhere around that number. And suddenly the governance becomes really difficult. It's centralized, it is really hard, and we needed to do something better about it. So ION is completely modular, and I'll show you more details in what that means. So we can start governing it a lot better in a lot more mature way, because the project matured on the code base, it has to mature in the governance. And this is our way of doing it. Also, part of open source governance is lowering barriers to contributors. We need more people to contribute. We want more people to contribute. Max was saying here that he had a small issue, and he fixed like 4 issues in production, real there. We want to make it as easy as possible for studios to come back and say, hey, I fixed this, take it. However, in the big monolithic project that this is complicated, because a single change can trickle down through so many pieces of code, and we need to check all of it, so we're splitting it out, and we're making sure that we will be able to more easily govern. And this comes with the fact it doesn't have to be us. We want plugins, we want modules, we want parts of the code to be owned by others, by those that write it, that want to maintain it, that want to give that project, and we want to give them the right to do it while communicating with the core team. So most of this work is aimed towards that goal, and it's still a way ahead of us. This is going to be not a trivial journey, but I think we will get there. Last but not least on the governance is minimizing fragmentations. Many open source projects hit this thing where suddenly there is 350 million forks of it. They are not even close to each other. They all divert just enough that no one knows what is the main. Someone suddenly takes over. It's the beauty of the open source, but it's the danger of open source at the same time. So if we manage to make the product in a way that we can minimize the fragmentation of it, that if someone wants to change part of it, they can do it without completely branching off. They can branch off in one part and they can use all of the other code, then we have succeeded, and I think it's going to be amazing then. So, out with the old, as they say, but we need to keep some of the good stuff. So what is not changing, importantly? So what now was called OpenPype tray application, what artists actually interact with on a daily basis, we believe does a pretty good job. So we wanted to get to the point that studios can actually migrate. Like migrating a pipeline, whoever has done it before is a thing of nightmares. It's the 75th Dante's hell that wasn't on that schedule. It's crazy. So we wanted to make sure this is possible to do. So at the moment, as the ION goes into version 1, for those that use OpenPype, the artist workflows don't change right now. The artist workflows stay the same. You don't have to retrain them. The open code, the code base of your contributions, code base of your plugins is largely transferable. It's not 100% one-to-one, but it should be absolutely minimal work that needs to be done to take my OpenPype extras that I have done in a studio and put them into ION. All of the scenes, and this is maybe this is a crucial point with migrating, any DCCs that have been created with OpenPype 3, Nuke, Maya, Houdini, whatever, you name it, all of them are 100% compatible with ION as it comes to a release. I can take that project, not that I would recommend anyone to switch pipeline version mid-production anyways, by the way, just to be clear, but we have to make sure that this is possible. If we need to take we start on ION and I want to take the old scene from previous pipeline, I have to be able to migrate it in without major struggles. So that was very important for us. And we are trying to do a seamless transition from OpenPype 3 to ION to those that are already using it. That is absolutely paramount for adoption and for anyone being, trusting that the pipeline is going to do what it needs to do. So we will be providing transition scripts. We will be providing tools inside of ION that will let you import OpenPype 3 project into ION, migrate it in there. We're planning to even run it with our clients, for example, in parallel, so we can very safely test on running production, certain publishers going into ION. If everything goes okay, when the studio feels confident enough, we'll simply flip the switch and continue without any disruptions to work. Once we are done with this work, that's when the application on the artist side can start taking advantage of the ION infrastructure of the new server. But this has to happen in steps because I'm never ever switching production hard cut pipeline ever again in any studio. I've done it enough times to have learned my lesson. Yeah, there are some PTSD situations here. I can see that in the crowd. So integrations at the moment are staying the same. I don't think these are all of them. I kind of plonked the icons that we had in there to have a nice grid. You can see there is a bit of OCD going on. Everything is nice and grid. But they are staying the same. We will work on separating them out of the main repository and making sure that they are then governable and maintainable individually. Right now, they're still in the main repository. We have to first switch the server, and then we can move them out. But they're staying the same, and there's going to be a lot more coming. So that's on the old front. Hopefully, if you're using OpenPype already, you shouldn't have to worry about migrating. It should be possible to do it stress-free. Famous last words, but it should be possible. Now, let's talk about the interesting stuff. So, what is new? So first of all, a completely new relational data model. Old OpenPype was running on Mongo, and it was talking to Mongo database directly. This is built. I will talk about the stack a little bit closer in the future, in the further part of the presentation. But what we got to is, firstly, we renamed asset to a folder. To anyone who knows what the OpenPype data model was, we were slightly confused it ourselves. So if you're wondering why is my shot actually an asset in the pipeline, in the thing, it's no longer the case. So in ION, the base entities are the same. However, now all of them have types. We weren't able to support this previously. Right now, we match data models of all other kind of project managements are out there, so we can sync them easily. Folders, you can have any types, arbitrary. Short, it can be a short episode, asset, it can be a book or a poster, or whatever your pipeline needs. If you have a completely different need, you can give it whatever type you require. Same comes from subsets for tasks. They can have any types. And because we switched to Postgres database, everything is relational and everything is interconnected in the whole ecosystem. Now, the more interesting part is that we have new pieces of data. So with the new data model that we put in there, we can synchronize from project management solutions a lot more precisely. In OpenPype 3, we were losing certain types of data. So, for example, statuses were not implemented in there at all because we considered them, that's a project management solution. I don't need it in a pipeline. Now, it turns out over time, you actually do need it in a pipeline because artists want to see if something is approved directly in their application, but also it opens the door for automating things like give me the latest approved version, not the latest version. So we're syncing a lot more data from project managements into OpenPype. We also sync in assignees. Now, this is not for project management purposes, but again, this is for the relational purposes and being able to crawl through the data and find out, okay, find all of the tasks that this person is assigned to and make sure that their data is updated for the latest versions, for example. So this is the whole point. We need to keep as much of this metadata in the pipeline sense as well, not just project management, so we can work with it down the line in automations, in scene building scripts, and so on. So, assignees, fairly self-explanatory. Tags, that was like maybe the most asked little annoying thing that we didn't have, and now we do. So you can tag anything anywhere. Tags are simple textual lists. They can be predefined on a project and locked. So then artists or everyone using it on tasks, whatever, all entities can be tagged. But we can predefine them on a project and make them available. So if I need a tag that tells me what camera was used, I can do it. If I need a tag that tells me what department is responsible, I can do it. But the users can also define their own tags on the fly. So we don't define and then lock you in there. As a user, I can go and I need to tag this with the new whatever information I put in there. And this tag stays for me, but it can be at any point promoted to the project tag again and made available elsewhere. This is very important because everything we do, we try to make sure, yes, there is a pipeline, but production happens, right? And sometimes you need to go around. Sometimes you simply need to fix something on the spot, and I think everyone has done it at some point. Even pipeline evangelists sometimes have to jump out, and we need to be able to take that information and put it back into the pipeline when need be. So completely free. Statuses, nothing extraordinary, same as in every situation, apart from beautiful UI that you'll see a bit later on them. You can set statuses, you can give them short names, long names. I think we can sync any project management kind of type in here without loss of data, I'm hoping. Custom attributes, in OpenPype you could do them, in AYON you could do them well. So essentially they have proper types, they are properly validated, they are searchable through GraphQL, through all the APIs that are in there. You can attach custom attributes to any entity in the system. From user to the shot, whatever it is, you can assign custom attributes. I'll skip the links and go to custom metadata. This is something we have added. At any point of the pipeline, you can put the data on anything. Again, any entity can take this. That is not exposed to the user, that is not exposed in the UI anywhere. That is there for you as a developer to hide stuff that you don't want other people to see, but you need it somewhere down the line. Whatever this is. This can be, I don't know, size of your t-shirt on a user attribute, but you don't want the whole studio to see it. Whatever you want. By the way, t-shirts, yeah? We put this there because we were bending our own data model in OpenPype when we found out very often you thought of everything ahead of time, and you never think of everything ahead of time. So this is something where you can put this information and maybe later promote it into custom attribute or work with it as you need. Now entity links, I said tags, but entity links is gonna be the biggest request for feature that we had. So we had a kind of entity link system in OpenPype 3. Now in AYON, the way it works, there are some pre-built links, link types, which are there as an example. As a starting point, we have a breakdown and a reference link. Essentially, every link type that you can define as a studio or as a developer has a name, obviously. Then it has what entity it goes from and what entity it goes to. So if you need links that connect versions to shots, or representation to representation, or they link shots to assets, assets to shots, whatever entity combinations, you can make these and you can use them as you need. So for example, the breakdown link, which we put in there by default, means that based on the project breakdown and the script, these characters need to be in these shots, these trees need to be in here. It's the standard kind of script breakdown situation. Now, this is the aspiration of the project, usually. Not always the reality at the end. So the idea is I can use the breakdown links to populate my relationships in the project. However, every time I publish something, when I publish a rig, I can create a reference link from a model to that rig, which is not aspiration of production. This is the reality of data that was actually published, and I can tell that V2 of a model was used in V5 of this particular rig. Now, this can be linked to any ways you can imagine, but importantly, because you can make them completely arbitrarily, we can down the line, for example, compare these. So we can have a look, right? So we were saying that these 5 characters need to be in these shots and in these shots and these shots, and it should be suddenly trivial to write a script piece of code that compares, hey, as these renders are going out, do we actually have all the scripted characters in all these shots? Do we need to update something? We can traverse through all of this, and hopefully this is gonna be very useful. And we have a scene building tools already that can pre-create your nuke script, your Maya scene based on like a template scene and fill it with correct data. Now with the links, we can kind of push it a lot further. So that is very exciting for us. So user management, very requested. We have it finally. It's very granular. It's quite robust. So you can create users. They can connect it to single sign-on as much as you want. We have a single sign-on by default with Discord, but that's just an example. You can automatically create your users with absolutely any provider that you would like. You can connect it to Active Directory. You can connect it to whatever you are using. We have fairly robust roles in the system. We don't go into the user level of permissions. We think that is a little bit too granular to be actually useful. But you can create any roles and any projects. You can change those permissions for various roles on various projects. So if I have an artist role, by default, let's say they can create publishes, but they cannot create shots. But I might have a small project where it makes sense for me, for artists, to actually create the shots because it's something super fast-paced. I can override that role on a particular project and say, hey, on this project, I allow artists to do this. Now, the permission levels at the moment go to, you can limit creation, you can limit editing of any entities, you can limit deleting. Any attributes can be limited to read and write, all the way down to API endpoints. So if you have technical artists in the studio and you have a TD role, and you want to let them create certain types of integrations, but you do not want to let them change the whole system under the hood accidentally, you can actually limit full sets of API, of the REST API and the GraphQL API from them. Actually, no, sorry, just REST at the moment. You can limit it from them, so they will not be able to do any damage. And let's be honest, if you're a bigger studio, you will have junior TDs. You need them to do the heavy lifting, but you really don't need them to delete all of the projects. Been there. So yeah, you can do whatever you want. Everything that we have is also changeable in bulk. So users in the user interface, you can take all of them at once, you can assign them to project all at once, and you can change their role all at once. You really do not have to click them one by one. Been there as well. We implemented teams. This is a feature that currently is in API and it's not used in automations yet. But so there are roles which tell you what the user has access to in terms of write and read permissions. And then there are teams which is an informational piece for the pipeline automation, but for the production crew mostly. And I'll show you what it looks like in the UI in a bit. But these teams can be defined. A person can be in multiple teams, and every team can have multiple leaders that you can name in a completely arbitrary fashion. So if I need to communicate to my team, hey, this is a 2D team, and this is your supervisor, and this is your lead, and this is a team of directors, and whatever it is, there's somewhere to put it, and we can then work with it in API level again. So this will unlock more automations. I'll show you a bit later what it looks like in the UI. Settings, those who used OpenPype settings, and I apologize for the text, that looks beautiful when it's on a good screen, the white on green. Settings in basic level work the same as they did in OpenPype. We do our best. Everything that should be configurable by supervisor or a TD, we put in settings UI. Now the settings UI is extremely robust system where you can actually add into it. There are schemas defined, and you don't need to know UI coding really to add more settings. The testament is that we actually, before Christmas, we had a hackathon of a full team, and I mean CG artists, sorry Libor, that have known nothing about coding whatsoever, and support people from the team, and everyone was converting settings from OpenPype 3 into AYON. Everyone was able to open that code and really just duplicate schemas, give it a bunch of attributes, and it starts populating the UI. So we want to give you that platform. There are project and site level overrides on practically everything where you allow it as a developer. So any setting you can think of, example would be my app play blast settings. I want all my app play blast to come looking exactly the same. By default in a studio, I have lights turned on, but on a particular project, I need to turn on shadows or whatever it is. You can override practically everything down to project level. And you can, as a developer, as a pipeline TD or a studio supervisor, you can allow override all the way to site level. Now, site for us is essentially a combination of a particular machine and a particular user. That's a site. So me as an artist, I can have two computers. They don't have to have exactly the same settings because, again, different hardware or something. But we can go down to this level with settings. Finally, we have full versioning and full history of all the changes of the settings, so we can go back and blame people when they break them. Those using OpenPype already, yeah, I think Peter here might have been the biggest proponent of this change. So in AYON, this is there. You can go back to any changes whatsoever, and there's a full versioning as well. So when you change settings in a certain version of an add-on, we can trace what those settings look like in a different version of an add-on as you kind of go through the deployment and you go up. So it should be pretty good. We log all of the changes. Importantly, all of those changes are visible in the UI. So you can go to a nice logging UI where you will see essentially all the changes that happened, and you can click on them, you can browse them, you can see the details. And for most of the logging, you don't actually need to go into code. You will in places, but it's not necessary. Those who worked with OpenPype settings, I hope, would agree that the UI is not bad in itself, but as it grew, it got slow. Now this is, I want to say incomparably faster, but I don't know if there is a bigger word than incomparably. Essentially, what you waited for 30 seconds to change somewhere and save, in here it's instant. It's really instant. There are a few pieces where we're still optimizing, but we went from seconds and sometimes minutes on a massive kind of setting on a big project and everything. It could really take a long time to store these things and retrieve them. In here, the worst case scenario I had was maybe a second or 2 seconds, and I get angry at that point, and Martin needs to fix it. So it's unbelievably faster. Add-ons can define their own settings. So if you make an add-on, doesn't matter whether that add-on is Maya integration, your own Maya integration, because you don't like our own, fair enough. You can define your own settings without writing much code. You just put it in there. It is presenting in the UI, and the add-on has access to these settings as you wish. And we have added project anatomy presets. For those who don't know and haven't used OpenPype at all, project anatomy essentially is the core settings of every project. It is where folders are, how folders are created. It's the file template naming. It's how everything core about the project, all the basic attributes of it. What's the frames per second rate, what is the resolution. We can now make presets for this. So as a studio, you can create animation preset, commercial preset, film preset, whatever you name it, and you can then just reuse them on new projects. Essentially, this is what it looks like on the. Oh, I can point. So in the UI of the settings right now, the way it's structured, essentially, you can switch between staging and production. So you always know whether you're looking at the staging settings, not running in production, not affecting artists, but you can run AYON. See, I'm going to learn it at some point. You can learn AYON. You can run AYON in staging setup. You can test a new version of an add-on. You can change its settings, and when you're happy with it, then you switch it into production, and you can do it individually, not the full package of a pipeline. We can say, I need to update Nuke. I change the settings. I validate that they are correct in the staging, and then I push it into production. So it still needs a little bit of work on the back end, hence the beta tag, but it is extremely close to finish. On the right side, then, essentially when something is changed, you see everything that has been changed live, and when you're happy with that, you commit the settings, and that moment they're changed. So you have a really full control over it. We are working towards the point, but we are not there yet, but we do want to add settings permissions to user roles as well. So the target is, if I'm an admin, I can change everything, but hopefully we'll get to the point that if I'm a comp supervisor, I might have access to Nuke settings, and I might be able to tweak them, but I will not do anything in the Maya settings. We're not quite there yet, but the architecture is there to support it. So, completely new web views. So, if you have producers that previously were pissed off that they had to, install a desktop application to see their publishes, to change settings, that's no longer needed. AYON comes with a web view that we are kind of expanding and will be expanding massively. You can see in the middle, that's essentially what the teams at the moment look like on the project dashboard. I jump in there. This is just supposed to give you an idea what the project is. This is not an analysis tool. This is something, if I have new people in the studio and they jump in and they click on a project, within 3 seconds they should see how active it is. So they can see in here on the top left corner, just life of the project. Is stuff being published? Is stuff being changed? Are statuses being changed? So they can see whether this is live project or archived project. They can see the basic deadlines. They can see kind of how big it is. They can see who is the core team. And this is up to you to set it up. So I click there and I can see this is my supervisor. They can see the latest publishes, so they can see the visual style of the project. This is not a replacement for a full project management, but this is the point that I can stay in this one tool as quickly as possible, and as I click between them, I can see what is the general state. This is what the new browser looks like. This is essentially where all of the publishes can be viewed. It is a very close replica of what Loader was in OpenPype 3, and we hope that we will get this look exactly as it is into all of the DCCs as well, so this will be fully unified. As you can see, there are statuses visible there as well. These, if you shrink it to a tiny little column so it's not bothering the artist, it will nicely shrink and you will only see the little icon. It scales quite pleasantly. So this is essentially where you spend the time as an artist looking at what was published. Again, not on a project management side, but what is actually there, what are the versions existing, what are the attributes of them. We have a new kind of table editor view, so any data that is now on entities in the database, you can actually edit it, you can browse through it. It is nice and fast. If you need to fix something on a pipeline side and not on a project management side, whatever data it is, you can do it. We will be expanding this massively as well as soon as we get some feedback from first users that jump on it. So these are kickoffs for the UIs. So, very big thing that's completely new is we have built-in services, which you cannot read in here, but we have built-in services and unified event queue on top of them. Meaning, in the past, when we wanted to run extra automations, triggers that automate your status changes, if my animation task is closed, I want to automatically open the status of whatever task is past that. We would have to run these services on separate Docker containers and separate servers, whatever it was. With AYON, there is a built-in services system. So your add-on can actually create a service script that AYON can then launch. It can run multiple versions. It can run it on multiple slave machines even if you need to. So you can spawn multiple machines for redundancy. A good example would be synchronization with project management. So ShotGrid sync or ftrack sync that keep looking on different service and they keep pulling the data into AYON. Until now, they're a separate service and we couldn't see them in the UI. Right now in AYON, you can see all of those that are running. I can see that I have 3 machines syncing from ftrack to AYON, for example. I can restart them. If they fail, I can see it. And it's nice and visual. And very importantly, all of the events that these services are creating and pulling and all of the events that happen in AYON go into one long unified event queue. So this is a pub subsystem in there. You can essentially go through the history of everything that happened. You can build relationships. You can essentially make relationships between them and automate things on top of it. Now the target here is that I can actually have an event queue where I can see all the events from AYON, but I can also see events from ftrack or ShotGrid or Kitsu, and I can also see events from Deadline, for example, or whatever other random management, or your Slack messages or whatever that is. And suddenly you have a pipeline, you have one long thing, and you can start making automations and building scripts that react between these. So we're quite excited about it, and we are now, while I'm on the topic, we are converting all of the project management integrations into this new service system. Now, ShotGrid is practically done. ftrack is done as well. So as a new thing, we are going to be officially supporting ShotGrid and ftrack as a front end for project management. Kitsu has been community maintained and actually contributed and supported for a good few months now. So all 3 are now at a very good state to use. Now, ShotGrid needs to be heavily tested in production. As far as we know, it does what it needs to do, but we will need some test cases that we can validate every little glitch that can happen in there. So keep in mind the beta tag, please, on the release. But yeah, the target here is that where we want to get to, and I'm hoping this will be in a few months' time, that you can run all of this at once if you need to. The pipeline is safeguarding the data that you have there. That is the most important asset that the studio have, right? It's the pictures that you create is the actual data in the scenes. It's not the statuses, it's not who does what, it's not the schedules. Schedules are virtual anyway. Whoever adhered to a schedule in their life, please raise your hand. No hands, I thought so. So, AYON is supposed to safeguard the important, the expensive stuff, the data. Now, if you need to use a different project management solution for project A because you like it in-house, you should be able to do it. If I am doing work as a vendor for someone bigger than me and I need to connect to their shot grid for this particular project, I should be able to do it. I should be able to connect it for that one project and let it sync. And I shouldn't need to retrain my artists how they work in their Maya scenes and suddenly there's a different button here because there's a different opinion from the pipeline sense. So this is where we're going. This is the target where we want to take it. It's not 100% there. We're still missing a few building blocks of this completely independent project-based project tracking, but we will get there. So what's under the hood? We changed the architecture completely on the server side. Again, the application at the moment is Python, PySide, that stays the same at the moment. This is all running on Postgres, RabbitMQ, Redis, Fast API, and React for the front ends. I won't go into the details. You can have a look. Those interested, the repository is completely public. It's all out there. It's already available. You can run it, you can test it, you can play it, you can feedback on it. That would be nice. So we made it a lot more robust. This essentially comes to what Remy was talking about, use boring technology. We think there is nothing here that is eccentric. We don't think there is anything here that hasn't been tested in a much, much larger applications. And I'm talking commercially uncomparably larger applications than visual effects is. We want to make sure that the tiny studio can deploy this and run it, and it's going to make sense for them. And we want to make sure that if a massive studio wants to redeploy their pipeline and they want to build it on top of some platform, they can safely do it. And the only limit might be the hardware of a server that they run it on. So this needs to be, and it is scalable vertically and horizontally. We can spawn multiple API servers on top of the Postgres database if need be. And that was, for us, actually really, really important. It's fully modular, as I said. The integrations, all of them will be converted to AYON add-ons, which means that if you're a studio that only uses TV Paint and Harmony or Selection and After Effects, you don't actually need all the massive integrations of Maya, Nuke, and all of this. You turn them off in the web UI. The UI that I was showing before, you literally switch them off, and suddenly all the build of the application that you're sending to your artist is going to be 50 megabytes instead of 400. Now I'm making up the numbers, but this difference really will be this large. So if you turn off an add-on, if you're not using Houdini in your studio, you should be certain that if something screws up in Houdini integration, and it always does, you know, this is code, so you build a new thing, a bug comes, it's not going to affect you. If you turn it off completely, it's simply not going to affect you. And until now, of course, in a monolithic project, it was possible for it to happen. You can tweak individual add-ons, extremely important. So if you don't like exactly how one particular integration is working, you can take it and tweak it. Each add-on that you build, or that we built, can define its own settings. It's completely separate front end. Now the front end that it does will be provided to the server. It will be presented to the users, to the artists, or to producers, whatever you do. And it doesn't have to run on React. It doesn't have to run on what we have in there. You can use whatever tech you want for the front end. For example, you make a business intelligence add-on that pulls all of the data, does some magic, and presents you with a dashboard, but you happen to have developers that are skilled in Vue, you can absolutely do it and embed it in the website. AYON will communicate, for example, selection of a context. I select a shot or I select an episode. This will be communicated to the add-on. Add-on can chew through it and show you a UI in whatever opinion it has, and it doesn't have to use our tech stack in there. Apologies. So, talking about that front end, there is a bunch of components that we have in there. Everything that we are doing across the board in front end are styled components. I'm not sure if everything is already, but we're definitely going that way. Am I right? Where's the confirmation head shake from someone in the team? I'm right, yes, thank you. So there are a bunch of them that you could use in your UIs. So if you're making your own UI in an add-on, you can take our status view and all of these and kind of mix and match. So we will be, over time as we do more of them, there will be more available as examples. And hopefully then you can make your UIs look nice without just building them completely from scratch. And all the APIs you craved for, maybe not, we don't have a Rust at the moment. Everyone seems to be about Rust nowadays. And they're documented. Guess what? They're all documented. So there is a full REST API. This is completely CRUD access, so create, update, read, delete on anything in the pipeline is accessed with a REST. It's quite extensive. The documentation, we will be improving on it, but we started from scratch and we were documenting from the beginning. So the documentation is auto-built directly in the product. When you deploy ION, inside of it there is a button that shows you API docs for that particular version that you're running at that moment. So any feedback on that, of course, there's going to be a lot more to come. There are individual API calls in there, but there are also bulk API calls. So if you have automations that don't iterate through shots one by one, but you want to send it a big bunch of data and get much faster response, it is there, and we will be working on this for foreseeable future. But at the moment, the rest is actually very stable. All of the work that we've done is using it. Second interesting one is GraphQL. GraphQL currently that we have there supports essentially the full data model is queryable with GraphQL. For those that don't know it, it's a fairly simple structured language where you can build your queries. But it also comes with the GraphQL view, or I actually forgot what this thing is called. Is it called GraphQL view? GraphQL something. It's a built-in tool where you actually don't see this on the left side, but you can browse through the data model in the GraphQL, and you literally are ticking boxes. And the query that is written in the middle in here that says, give me all the folders of a type shot and find all their edges and nodes, and for each node give me ID, path, name, and subset count. And essentially what you get on the right side is a spit out of the data. You don't have to write it by hand. You can nicely click them through. Those who worked with GraphQL, this is fairly standard, but for me, that was actually revelation when I saw it. So that's there. And the Python API, also fully documented. We still need to run things on it, but there are doc strings everywhere. It's very clean. It's written completely from scratch. And importantly, it's separated from the main product. So if you're building your own tools, for example, on top of ION, you can deploy this from pip, install it directly, separately, and use it to communicate with the server on a Python level. Also, we actually made sure that it has absolutely minimal dependencies. I think there are like 3 packages that it's dependent, 4 packages that it's dependent on, and they're absolutely standard requests and something else. Thank you. So yeah, there are APIs that bring in 50 other things. We've made sure that this is the essence, really the minimal, so you can get it in anywhere in your tools and hopefully not go into dependency hell. We've been there. It's just not easy to get out of it, but we've been there, trust me. So that's hopefully that's going to help a lot of you. Now, what are the next steps? So roadmap towards the release candidate. We need to add a few things on an infrastructural level before we can say this is a release candidate. At the moment, this is deployable, this is testable on application side and on the server side. The API is very safe. What we need to finalize is versioning of the server and the add-ons. This needs to be very clear, with dependencies need to be absolutely clear-cut, so it's not quite there yet. There is some API updates that we need to finish for client and add-on updating, meaning when I have an artist, and this will be quite exciting for those that work with remote artists, where we go in is that you install ION server, your artists log into it, and that's the place where they download the actual application for the pipeline from, logged to that particular version, and this will self-update on their machine with all the individual add-ons and things. So you don't need to send them packages, hey, this is a zip with the pipeline that's active today and tomorrow maybe not. So there's a little bit of work that needs to be done there, but we are very close to nice automatic updates of the individual packages for the artists. We're almost done with OpenPype project importer. I mean, without that, it's going to be really extremely difficult to migrate and validate whether everything is feature parity with what we had in the old and we have it in the new now. So that's almost done. And we still need to migrate and clean up documentation. Now, if you go At the moment, to the repository, you'll see that the application itself, the one that runs on the desktop for the artist, it's still called OpenPype. This is actually an important point. The server is ION now, the application is OpenPype, because we need to be extremely careful about this transition with the studios that are already running it. We do not want to do double development. We've done it before. So what we're doing, we are making OpenPype forward compatible with the new server. And at the moment, there is a branch that I will post in the notes on the online afterwards, and I'll tell you all with the beers because I don't remember from top of my head. But there is a branch in the project on OpenPype called ION server or ION connection. There's a tag on the project, which is ION/0.10. You can use this to connect to both. So this is a version of OpenPype that in the environment variable, I tell it you're running in ION mode or you're running in OpenPype mode, and you can validate everything. It should be functional identically, but talk to different servers. Now this will allow us to do this parallel deployment in studios, proper validation in the studios, and then smooth transition. That's why it's still called OpenPype. And we will be renaming it within the next few months, but we have to be extremely careful because this is the balance between, potentially making life difficult for early adopters versus something being marketingly clean, but that's not the important bit. We need to make sure this is stable as it goes. So there are some migrations needed. OpenPype IO is still the place for the documentation. Within the next few weeks, this will be migrated back. Thank you. And roadmap for release, number one, we're hoping it's going to be Q3 of this year. Oh, the previous one I didn't mention, we are aiming for Q2. End of Q3. We are working on a node-based project viewer and editor. Because this is relational, we want to give you the option to look at your project in a node-based view. We're going to be working on some artist dashboards. We need more UIs for certain of the API points I mentioned, like themes and similar. We need easier ways to manage them so they're actually usable right out of the box, even though now they're usable with API, but not everything has a UI at the moment. And we are really hoping that we'll get to the point of a centralized add-on repository, so it's going to be really easy to share these. Now, we want to get to the point where, apart from the main repository, we will probably be able to add others. And we want, if someone wants to make an add-on and share it with everyone, share it with the project, they shouldn't need to go through us. They should be able to put it out there and people should be able to use it and try it. So we would absolutely love to get to that point. But as with every project, these priorities might change a little bit, so don't take my word for it 100%. On pipeline level, which is the application on the desktop, the integrations with DCCs, again, even those modules all have to be converted into add-ons. This year, we're going to be working on cross-DCC workflows quite a bit. We're going to be looking into Material X. We're going to be looking into USD a lot more. I think we're now at a pretty good spot. We are almost finished with the resolver, and the resolver has a first-class REST API call on the server as a first-class citizen. Now, a lot of validations needs to be done in terms of speed, in terms of caching and all of this, so there's a lot of work to be done, but that is the target. We want to finalize migration to the new publisher. We have a much nicer UI for a publisher. In all applications, it's not used across the board, and we've gotten a lot of amazing feedback recently, so we're going to be implementing that and making it super artist-friendly, essentially hiding all of the technical crap, hopefully what you were mentioning, Remy. And we have a massive push on integration tests. We have an infrastructure ready for this, and this is not trivial. I'm not talking about code tests. I'm talking about when we update a plugin for Maya or for Nuke, we can now run automated tests that go through the publishing process as artists would do it in an automated fashion. Without this, we cannot scale it further, so this is going to be a big push, and the main part this year is going to be getting this absolutely rock solid. We believe the feature set is actually pretty good, and we need to make sure that when studios use ION, it's going to be trustworthy to use it for a very, very long time without having to change anything. So there's going to be a big push on this. And as a last thing, next steps. Where we want to get to here is for ION, and that's why one of the reasons for change of the pipeline, this is not supposed to be just pipeline. We want studios to be able to use ION as the platform in the studio. So essentially, server might be relevant for you, but the pipeline might not. Pipeline and the server together might be relevant for you if you're a smaller studio, and you should be able to do it. You should be able to write add-ons completely independently, and of course, the community is absolutely paramount. Without that, we wouldn't be standing here. So there are these kind of 4 pillars that we're building it on, and we're going to be expanding it as a platform And it's going to go hopefully a lot further than just pipeline, even though pipeline is what we do well, and pipeline is what we will keep doing as a primary focus, don't get me wrong, but there are other paths opening. So how to get started? Go to our GitHub and you will see the repository. Yeah, thank you. See the repository, and 3 ways to use it really. You can use it out of the box. If you're a smaller studio or mid-sized studios, this is probably what you want. Take it as it is, deploy it with the integrations, off you go with the pipeline. If you're a little bit bigger, it's likely you will need some changes. So we want you to take it and customize the add-ons. Take the Maya, fork just the Maya, tweak it to your liking. That doesn't mean you have to change everything else. You might have specialists in the studio that are really, really good at Maya development, but you might not have ones that are for After Effects. So take what is there and change only those bits that you need. So that's kind of the second tier that you can do, usually for mid-sized studios, very valuable. Now, for the major studios, what we want to get to is that it makes sense to take AYON as a server and connect your pipeline to it. Now, we want to remove as much vendor lock-in as possible. There are other pipeline solutions out there that have been running for a very long time, and studios find them that they are locked. It is possible. You can take your tools, you can build them completely from scratch on top of the server. As I said, let's stop reinventing the wheels. How about we take wheels that actually spin and make better cars out of them? It's like, let's just not make another API. Even though we just made another API, I know what it sounds. But this is what we want to provide you. We want to make sure that you can focus on the production situations and fixing the production pipelines, and let someone else or let the community look at the big underlying topics and make that as stable as possible. So there are multiple ways, and you can do it now. Now, when can you try it? You can try it today, with a caveat that your mileage will vary. It is a beta. It is not fully production tested. I mean, OpenPype is, you could see here, but the AYON side, there will be bugs. Please try it, test them, report them, fix them. That would be the best. But most importantly, feedback, report them. Anything that you find, let us know on our Discord. There is an AYON beta channel. Any information, any feedback would be amazing. So yeah, go out and try it. And that's it from me. If there are any questions?
Anyone? Any questions? Okay. Let me run there.
Now, I don't know how much time we have here, but you can butter me with questions downstairs in the bar afterwards, so feel free.
Hello.
Hello.
Is there any way that you will manage, the GitHub and the add-ons with a scheme like the bigger application? So you have one version, you do bug fixes on that, you maintain that, and then you move to the next version. Yeah. Because that's one of the things that we find difficult to keep on. Right now.
That's essentially exactly the point that was there for the release candidate roadmap. There is a decision has been made now that we will be versioning every individual add-on separately, as close to semantic version as we can. So if there's going to be a patch, those were fixes. If there is a minor, there were bigger things. Every add-on will go version independently, and we will be releasing in certain periods kind of validated package of the whole thing. So we will be releasing maybe quarterly releases, say, this is server with add-ons with everything that we have tested, that's in production. This is the safe start. But we will do all we can for you to be able to update just Maya and leave everything else. And we are working on a robust interdependency system. So you can make a new version of an add-on, and that tells you, I need this version of server, and I need this version of another add-on, because I might be dependent on it. So this is a lot of work that is still in progress, but it's paramount for it to work.
And another question would be for the actual add-ons. So you're mentioning that you're moving integration to add-ons.
Yeah.
And will those integration right now change kind of code styles? So they will be interrogating with REST API instead of, the style that this is right now?
So at the moment, all of the integrations, the DCCs, they already, even in the production releases right now, in silence, they are forward compatible. So they now communicate with Mongo database, but through the AYON Python API already. There is a switch inside of the API that goes between the servers. So when we separate, for example, Maya out into its own repository, at the first moment, we validate that nothing broke, that it stays the same and it communicates through the Python API. And then when we're certain everything is smooth, we'll start removing the old Mongo code, the backwards compatibility from the API. So we're doing this in 2 or 3 steps to make sure that we can migrate productions. Yep.
Thanks. Any other questions? Someone? Okay.
You were talking about how this setting or enabling the add-ons would change the build. Does that mean you can only build if you have a connection with the database, or how would that work?
So the way this is changing in an overall, without going into too much kind of small technical detail, essentially the base build plus all of the add-ons are kind of separate packages now. So as an artist, when I download the build of the app, it's going to be a lot smaller. That doesn't have any of the add-ons. It only really has the core. And every time I say I run OpenPype on my machine, it looks whether a production version's changed, and if they have, it's going to download those and kind of on the fly put them in there. Now, those are kind of pre-built. So every add-on, when you deploy it to your server to be available for the artists, it is kind of a zip package which has a server side that defines the settings and everything, and it has the client side, which is the bit that downloads. Now, there is also a bit that defines its Python dependencies. And what we actually do when you run OpenPype, we look at all of the production-enabled add-ons, and we cross-compare all of their Python dependencies and build a package from it, which can be local on the artist machine. So there's a bit of dark magic going on in the background, but it should be fairly straightforward when this is done. I think this part is already functional to a large degree. Mike, shout.
Sorry? Yeah. Does that technically mean that if you're like changing projects, that basically your local system needs to rebuild?
It technically means that where we're going with this, that if you change a project and you change a version of an add-on on that project, you should be able to run dynamically both of those at the same time. Like the add-ons, you don't get one big package locally. You get a folder with add-on and its versions, and and so it goes. Now there is a lot of stuff to still kind of tweak and figure out. This is non-trivial, but there's the target. We want to get to the point where you can run different version of Maya add-on on one project, a different version of Maya add-on on another project. Now, a lot more trivial to say than to do, but I think we'll get there.
Can I ask one more question? By separating the add-ons, like the integrations for Maya, for example, now you have global plugins that are not specific to Maya. How would we basically still maintain that separation?
There is a core add-on. It's something we call core add-on. So it's something that goes on top of the server still, that includes all of the global code base that can be then used by others, and that's actually the only one that is required, that needs to be there. But we put that as an add-on as well, so we can version it and maintain it in the same way. So new Maya can say, I need an updated version of the core. So each add-on basically tells, I need these versions of the other add-ons. Yeah, precisely.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thank you. And there's one more question.
Yeah, so you were mentioning the tool stack where you mentioned Python as a programming language that works with OpenPype and AYON. But my question is there an idea or do you guys want to support other programming languages for the add-ons so that people can use their best knowledge to produce something that has, because you have the API now and you have standard inputs, standard outputs. Is there a plan or possibility?
That depends what the add-on needs to do. I'll put it this way: if it's an add-on like I use Maya integration because we're talking about. If that's an add-on like that communicates with the DCC inside of it, you essentially have to use what the DCC lets you. Like a Maya add-on without the Python would not be trivial. It would be doable. You could do a C++ craziness, but essentially that is the main requirement. Now, if you're doing add-on, which is for Slack, for example, it would be possible to some degree, but it would have to be very limited to what it actually does. As soon as it starts integrating with all of the other sections, you will need to stick to Python. But if it's an add-on that is purely on a server, you can expand that a little bit. You can kind of build that logic on something else, but it will be fairly non-trivial.
Okay, thank you.
So, any more questions, guys? Okay. Why not? Cool. Finally.
That's why I'm here. I promised much shorter presentation, and then it went on. So yeah.
I promise it's a quick question.
No, go for it.
The look of it now feels very much like a CMS. And are you trying to align so that you can better communicate with things like F-Track and ShotGrid, or are you trying to replace it, or is it both?
There were bets before this whether this question is going to come up. No, so the thing is, the web views that you saw, the main point of those is that we can eliminate need for installation of ION for those that don't need it on desktop. Producers, coordinators, people that really don't need publishing, but they need to see the data. That's the primary target. Now, those are the pretty buttons conscious very often, so that's why it's looking nice. And we're trying to make it look nice. There is a massive overlap, of course, but the main reason now why we've added statuses, assignees, and all of these tasks is so we can as closely match data coming from various CMSs, so we don't lose them for automations. Because the amount of questions we have, hey, can I automate my scene based on blah, blah, blah. You put something in there, and we weren't able to do it because we make very conscious choice of never querying external databases for anything pipeline related. So your data is really yours. So if you want to automate based on ShotGrid data, you will have to write your own add-on. ION by default will sync the data from ShotGrid to ION, and then all the scenes run there. So if you disconnect from F-Track middle of the project, whatever happens, internet goes down or something like that, your scenes work, your publishing work, the only thing that doesn't happen is the review video doesn't go up eventually to F-Track. That was the primary target. We are very excited that this is a pipeline that you can use with any of these. And we're strong believers that you should be able to switch between them. I mean, for what I care, if someone writes a Trello integration to ION, by all means, I mean, that should be possible. So yeah, we're not trying to replace it. We have a very good relationship with them, and we have a lot of clients that like their features. And there is always going to be a bit of overlap because of this, but the target is so the pipeline can serve them better, essentially. That's the reason. I think there was a thank you into the turned off microphone for those that are watching the stream.
I'm on. Okay. There was one more question, I think. Yeah, okay. Here you are.
Step here so I can see. Oh.
So my question is about archival. So once the show is over, right, and we need to archive only the published pieces of the work. And is there a plan to do something like that for ION?
In short, yes.
Okay.
It's we already have a solution for it, which is there are bits and pieces which are not in public repositories.
Okay.
Ooh, I'm feedback in here, which are not fully in public repositories, mostly because we are careful about what we put out there, so it's stable enough. But there is a tool already in testing that can do this, where you can tell it, find last 2 versions of every publish of every show. That if this types of task, you can kind of go quite crazy in how you configure it.
Okay.
And it spits out the list of what will be archived or deleted. Then you can run it, and then it kind of helps you with the archival. Now, obviously, your mileage will vary if you've done half of your data outside of the pipeline. That's a hard one to help then.
Yeah. Last but not the least, but would it also change the paths to relative paths? Because then in future, if you have to open it now.
No, I mean, at the moment, it doesn't.
Okay.
It would be a beautiful thing to strive to, but there is out of all the DCCs we support, this is possible in maybe half of them in a reasonable sense, and the other half you would go crazy just trying to do it with an API.
Yeah, where the binary files are there, it would be crazy. Means as long as nuke, Maya, and all that, you can do it.
It's a beautiful target, though.
Yeah.
It's but I mean, right now it's not on the roadmap. I'll put it that way. But it would be possible with the studio to do it, because if we keep the links that I was talking about, you should actually be able to trace back.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Ouch.
There's one more question on. See, when we get data from the clients, right? They're all EXRs with having their own metadata in it, like lens information and film gates and frame rates and all that. Would ION let us import them? And into specific fields, so that then those things can get automated.
So right now it doesn't do this out of the box, but this is a terrible feedback. There's a tray publisher, what we call tray publisher. It's a standalone publishing application that you run, which comes with pre-built types of publishes but it's actually very easy to take it and expand it to anything else. So I'll give you an example. For a client, we've done a publisher like that where we just give it a bunch of PSDs, right? And the tray publisher goes through them, it analyzes inside, it spits them into individual layers, turns them into JSONs and backgrounds. So the point is you have the tool in there that you can do it. It's a question of essentially one Python script that will publish the EXRs, which you already do, but it's just augmenting it to read the metadata and write it into the right fields on the API. I think that would be fairly trivial job.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Okay, thanks. How we are with the time?
I think we're a little bit past it, but we can be hungry, essentially.
Yeah, so any more questions?
Last one, how about that?
Okay, so the last question.
Last two, if there are two, that's last two.
Okay. What's your t-shirt?
Too small. You mentioned independent dependencies for each package or add-on.
Yeah.
And then you are able to run them at the same time on the same site, same artist, same machine. That means that you can have the dependencies that are incompatible with each other, for example, to different versions.
That's going to be, of course, problematic again. So we try our best to resolve. You go through all the add-ons, you get their Python dependencies, and we do our best to cross-resolve a reasonable environment. And correct me if I'm wrong, Kuba, but I think we can then individual other environments, other dependencies pull into that add-on separately, right? If I'm not mistaken.
We can talk about it later.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It is very complicated. But it's a problem we deal with on a daily basis, as you would imagine. I'm hoping it will be somewhat possible, but it's not trivial.
Thank you.
You might need to replace an existing dependency with another one on the fly, and it gets ouchy.
Okay, do we have the last one or not? Question.
Ah, beautiful.
Okay.
Thank you. And I have to say, well done.
Thank
amazing,
you.
amazing work. We are a small to mid-sized company. We'd like to be a large company. You talked about the larger companies possibly hooking up their pipeline to the AYON server.
Yeah.
So the AYON server becomes the common element in that.
Yes. Yeah.
And you are dealing with things like currently the integration into ShotGrid and other databases.
Yes.
If we have a data model in our database, we would like to sync to AYON server. Is your table structure, etc., open source and for us?
Yeah.
So we can
absolutely.
Work on,
yeah. It's essentially what you can do. We're trying to clean up the FTrag and the ShotGrid integration as much as possible, so they act as the showpieces of how this can be done. They are quite complex, so usually I think others will be slightly simpler. So you can take it and have a look how that's done. You can run automated service in exactly the same way and do any mapping. Now it could happen that you have something in your data model that doesn't map to ours in any way, shape, or form. In that case, because you would have to make an add-on anyways for this. Now every add-on can define its own database on top of it. So we have some tables in a database, which are standardized, but an add-on can add a new table, which is just for the add-on, with extra fields or extra data. Add-ons can add their own attributes into the main database as well. So if there's something you're missing, you can do that. There's quite a few ways that you can bend it. I really hope that we will very rarely hit a data model that we cannot map into ours. It might be opinionated exchanges between the name of a, what we call a folder somewhere else might be called entity, and this will be there, but it should be doable.
Thank you.
Okay, so
thank you very much. I think we'll wrap this up for now, and I'll see you all downstairs in a bar in about an hour. Now we'll have an hour break. We'll be down there from 7 o'clock. There will be drinks, there will be celebration, there will be talks, there will be geeking out. So come and join us now. Go get some dinner somewhere else. There's lots of lovely restaurants around here. So hopefully you'll find some bite to eat and join us from 7 o'clock or later if you wish for drinks downstairs. Thank you very much.